Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar, part of our sustainability series. And today we're going to be talking about monitoring and reporting sustainability performance. My name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News, and if you're unfamiliar with BHN, we're an online trade publication and we cover the global boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotel industry. As I mentioned, this episode is part of a larger sustainability webinar series sponsored by Beyond Green, a sustainable hotel collection. And today we have a short video to play for you. Further details about Beyond Green have been popped into the chat there. And our second series sponsor is Ruckus, a provider of networking equipment and connectivity. And once again, we have a short video to play for you today.
Ruckus solutions deliver operational efficiencies that are crucial for maintaining profitability and enhancing guest satisfaction. Improving staff safety and inventory management with location tracking and panic button solutions. Boosting employee efficiency to maximize time utilization for enhanced customer service. Every hotel system operating seamlessly under a single network for unified workflows and simplified management. Ruckus solutions empower hospitality businesses to reduce their environmental footprint, conserve resources, and contribute to a more sustainable future. Reducing energy costs with IoT-enabled thermostats for sustainability, and enabling remote monitoring and control of building systems and equipment. Designed to support current and future standards, protocols, and technologies, all fully backed by the expertise and support of a leader in hospitality solutions. Optimize every hotel with always-on Wi-Fi, smart technology, service efficiency, and customer loyalty, and sharing their experiences with others, so you can improve occupancy rates, RevPAR, and guest satisfaction scores. It's time to differentiate your property, minimize costs, and drive revenue performance. Unlock the future of hospitality with Ruckus Solutions.
And once again, further details about Ruckus have been popped into the chat. So let's meet our panelists for today, and it's going to be easier for me to hand over and ask each to introduce themselves individually. And I'll move from left to right, as per the PowerPoint slides. So I'll kick off with Tommy, and welcome.
Thanks, Eloise, and nice to meet everyone. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Tommy Eaton. I'm a director of Clean the World Europe. I'm also founder of a company called Bamboo Brush, a B Corp company called Bamboo Brush. But specifically on the Clean the World side, we work with about 9,000 hotels globally, specifically around recycling hotel room amenities. So you've probably heard of the soap recycling program that we have, pretty famous, but we now have a full solution for plastic bottled amenity recycling. And then behind that, we have a full impact data reporting system. So really, we say ESG in action and sustainable solutions. So yeah, great to meet you all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tommy. And over to you, Jamie, next, please. Welcome.
Thanks, Eloise, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Really looking forward to today's webinar. So yeah, my name is Jamie Craze and I lead ESG services at Omniview. And a little bit about us. We are an ESG data collection and reporting company serving businesses in the hotel industry and further afield. And our aim is to make it really kind of quick, easy, affordable to deliver financial grade, auditable carbon and sustainability data for our clients.
Super. Thank you, Jamie. Soraya, over to you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Soraya. Welcome, everyone. I am the responsible business director at 4C Group. We've kind of transitioned from ESG to responsible business because it's just a better practice of doing business. And I manage the strategy, implementation, and monitoring across our hotel group in the UK. And we're finding a balance between sustainability, social equity, and costs, especially in this type of environment right now. Thank you for having me.
Super, thanks, Soraya. And last but by no means least, Gavin, over to you.
Hello, thanks, Eloise. My name's Gavin, and I'm the general manager at One Aldwych, which is a luxury, independently owned hotel in the centre of London, right in the centre in Covent Garden. And we're extremely proud to have just been accredited with B Corp status. And we're really always trying to find the balance between being very sustainable in everything we do, but still providing a luxury guest experience, which is a fine balance, and one that we're constantly striving for. So yeah, absolutely, I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you, Gavin. And all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are in the chat. It'd be great for you all to connect and carry on the conversation, even after today's webinar. So, brief overview of how today will run. We'll spend 45 minutes chatting with our panelists today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, please submit these using the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. I'll get round to asking those where relevant. This webinar is being recorded. Everybody that has registered will receive a copy of the recording within a couple of days' time. So before we kick off, I always like to provide some context to today's conversation, hopefully to get those bright ideas sparked. And on your screens are all articles that has been published on Boutique Hotel News in the last 9 months or so. The first article on the left-hand side explores the back of house roles that AI will play in reducing a hotel's carbon footprint. While the other 2 stories are examples of the sustainability initiatives hotel groups are introducing. So sticking with IHG this summer, they launched its Low Carbon Pioneers programme with properties such as the Kimpton in Budapest helping IHG to test, learn and share findings on sustainability measures. So each hotel within this programme will run initiatives, and this could include high efficiency heat pumps or fully electric kitchens. And these hotels will use IHG's Green Engage environmental platform to report back on that data into the company. And in spring this year, we also saw Village Hotels rolling out its ESG and sustainability strategy across its 33 properties. And all of these initiatives at property level are being overseen by a quarterly sustainability steering group attended by the Village exec team and chaired by by Kelly Turner, Director of ESG. And from 2025, so next year, Village will start to publish an annual ESG and sustainability report. On the next slide, I'd like to highlight a report that was actually published last week from sustainability consultants LIFA. And they spoke to leaders from a wide range of industries, logistics, government, including travel and hospitality. And some of these findings I just want to briefly share. So while 80% of these businesses are genuinely committed to sustainability, 75% of senior leaders report that their teams are under-resourced, which is severely limiting their capacity to drive meaningful change. 29% of businesses feel that their efforts are integrated with broader business objectives, but 35% feel that their initiatives were not aligned at all. 75% of respondents expressed doubt that their companies can meet net zero benchmarks, and 89% believed that leaders were not fully aware of the potential fines and business risks associated with non-compliance. So how is the industry responding to stats like this? Well, we have an example here of the Energy and Environment Alliance and King's College London, which are currently recruiting for its executive ESG programme for hospitality leaders, which begins again in January 2025, and a new education programme, which is what you can see on your screens now, focused on the practical aspects of delivering ESG in hospitality, will also soon launch. So I hope that gives some background as to why we're here and precisely what we're going to be talking about today. And I would like to kick off today's conversation by coming straight to Jamie. OmniView collects reports, compiles auditing data. So what are the most critical data points do you believe that hotels should track in order to measure their sustainability performance?
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Eloise. I think one way to kind of look at this is there's critical in two senses of the word. Critical from a compliance perspective, and then critical from a strategic perspective as well. So starting with compliance, obviously carbon emissions are a great place to start. I would say they're the most commonly asked for, either by kind of regulation or by other stakeholders at the moment, and undoubtedly the most complicated to measure. So it's a really great one to get to grips with first, and really kind of, I guess, get over that first hurdle. Worked with kind of hotel clients and, you know, clients in the broader hospitality industry is seeing that a lot of corporate customers are now asking for carbon data. That might be quite specific, so it might be kind of carbon emissions per room night for the hotel, or carbon emissions per event as well. So something which is great to be prepared for. And also staying on carbon, there's an increasing number of banks now that are kind of including those requests within terms for financing or refinancing, particularly if you're looking at some form of kind of green project or initiative. So a really important one to understand and report on. In terms of wider metrics, kind of sustainability metrics, it depends what your reporting obligations are or what framework you're reporting against. In the environmental, on the environmental side of things, water and waste are very important. Should be worth kind of noting that, you know, you should be tracking your water and waste because these will feed into your carbon calculations anyway. On the social side, gender pay gap is kind of an obvious kind of front runner there in terms of requirements. But then you can also look at things like staff diversity, or how much you're kind of paying or supporting your staff. And then governance, not talked about as much, not quite the kind of hot topic, I guess, but looking at things like your board structure, any kind of GDPR or tax interventions, and then checking for certain plans and policies. So whether that's a whistleblower policy, anti-slavery policy, or maybe net zero or biodiversity plans. So I think it's important to kind of start with getting that good coverage across the board. And that also means that you're then going to future-proof yourself against any other sustainability requests that might come in down the line. It also means that, you know, people like your investors, your customers, any other stakeholders, they have comparable data. So if they're comparing your hotel to another one, it's actually easy for them to make a really informed decision. Once you've got these sorted, you might then want to look at more kind of bespoke data points. I'm sure Sarai would have some great examples of these, so I'll leave those to her for kind of her contribution. But broadly speaking, I think that would come down to what you as an organization deem is material to your business, and also identifying areas in which you want to improve, and then setting kind of relevant KPIs there to track that progress.
Thanks, Jamie. Really great overview there. Let's hand it over to Soraya. Let's bring her into the conversation now. Soraya, could you talk us through your strategy for measuring performance across the 4C portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started with, you know, doing a carbon emission audit across all our hotels. And while that was useful, I think it was more useful on an auditing basis and a compliance basis. But to actually generate the impact on an operational level, we had to change a few things. And so I looked at our P&Ls, for example, and I wanted to understand, you know, how could we have a similar KPI to the ones that are traditionally used in the hotel industry and bring them across like maybe our 5 core streams. So our streams are water, energy, waste, procurement, and we also have food waste. And so having those types of comparable metrics, like Jamie mentioned, was easier to showcase our performance across the group. I'm not going to say it was easy, because initially when I wanted to gather that data, it wasn't as streamlined as a P&L. We didn't have the ADR, the occupancy. I called up a lot of our utility companies. I can give you an example of our waste provider, for example. You know, I wanted to understand how much general waste versus recycling was being collected, and I noticed that their data was being measured by the number of bags we ordered versus the collection. So that obviously skews your data, and it causes a lot of mistrust within an organization. So I would say that for the first year, if you pick a few key areas that you'd like to focus on, and then ask your suppliers and ask your providers what type of information they give, it'll be so much easier to streamline and create those KPIs that your internal stakeholders can trust, because they're the ones on the ground that are going to be making the most impact. And so in terms of types of levels of data, obviously it depends. You'll have the general management that have certain KPIs that they're following. You'll have the board that have other KPIs that are more compliance related. And then from the team members, they have their own. So it's translating the type of data that I'll probably talk about later, and how that can be actionable and made relevant to the different team members when they do those day-to-day actions that will make that impact.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that that was in the kind of like first year, or sort of like mapping out. Could you just maybe elaborate on what were the next steps after that? Once you kind of figured out what it was that you wanted to track, how was that enforced?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we're on our third year. So obviously we've progressed the last 2 years. So the first one was gathering data. The second was understanding, those data gaps. So we've got some hotels that were constructed just after COVID. We've got hotels that have been there since the early 2000s. So it's actually just managing the expectations from the different properties and putting a CapEx or OpEx budget to make sure that we get that data. So smart metering, for example, or changing different providers. So that was probably the next stage. And then finding relatable data sets that were pertinent to those different stakeholders that I talked about. What I mean by that was, we initially had a scorecard. Every month we publish a scorecard across various metrics. And one of them is actually around ESG, so water, waste, and energy, which is really important because they need to see how they've done compared to the previous year on the same month. I initially used, full numbers of consumption, but, you don't want to penalize the business for doing well, because there may be increased utility. So then and I'm sure Gavin can probably attest to this later, you want to find that kind of middle ground between sustainability and driving performance across the hotel group. So we changed that this past year. We've changed it per guest, for example, so your utility per guest. And I think that was so much easier to showcase that you can make a difference, and there can be certain efficiencies that come into place. And the general managers were way more receptive of that type of information. And I think that's one thing, is you can share enough data. It's the way that you communicate it and showcase the actions that they can make without penalizing their performance.
We're going to touch on the communication piece a bit later on, because I think that's super important, and something that I have learned through my conversations hosting these webinars, but also off camera too, is that at first it can be incredibly overwhelming in terms of the data collection, and that you just collect everything and anything that you can possibly get your hands on, when actually it can be a lot more simpler. And in some cases, taking a step back and just identifying one area that you can improve is better than trying to tackle everything at once. Soraya, I'd like to stay with you just for a moment, because when we first touched base, you mentioned that your background is within data science. And something that I've also talked about is whether we're going to see data scientists, even, all these AI gods now moving into our sector in order to help push it forward. How is your background helping you to shape your approach to sustainability reporting? And do you have any advice for anyone else who's perhaps early on in their journey for, coming up with a technique for actually collecting, cleaning, and analyzing those data sets?
Yeah, that's also a great question, because I think it is very overwhelming, the type of data that you can aggregate. I think if you find those 3 areas that you think you can have the highest impact for, that is probably the best way of kind of dealing with that. For example, you have human error and you have infrastructure constraints. And I think understanding that when delivering the data can make it way more receptible. So I'll give you an example. And I think this is the data science in me came in from, okay, I'm going to do everything data literate. I'm going to assume that everyone sees it the way that I do, but I had never worked in operations before. And so now I've taken a different approach, and it's way more collaborative because it's that stakeholder alignment. It's what can they do in the day-to-day to make that difference, because they don't always want to be in the red. So the cleaning of the data is an interesting one. I think initially I wanted to invest in smart meters, but I took a step back because I actually just wanted the business to understand what would it mean to take your meter readings and see when you're writing things down every week, do you actually notice certain usage go up compared to the previous one? So it'll enable them to take a moment to say, wait, that doesn't look right. Did I misread that, or what happened? And I actually, in one of our businesses, it was like I think a 20% increase compared to the previous year. And it was because their boiler internal temperature was turned up, and it allowed them to investigate. So I think before we go to the most, advanced technology, just allowing them to understand what those data sets mean and how you gather that data and what you can do is the most impactful.
Thanks, Soraya. Gavin, let's bring you in here. We learned, well, firstly, I'll say congrats on the recent B Corp certification. I believe that news was revealed last week, and it's certainly not an easy one to achieve. And with that in mind, what I am keen to learn is about what you learned during the process for applying for B Corp certification. What challenges did you face? How did the team overcome those challenges? Have you been able to identify those areas for improvement? Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for the sort of note on B Corp, because we're absolutely delighted. It's been a long journey, and it's definitely not an easy recognition or accolade to get. So we're absolutely delighted, and a lot of hard work from the entire team has gone in. And I suppose some of the key things for us anyway, one of the key challenges was the fact that the building was constructed in 1907, and it's become a hotel 25 years ago. But obviously in 1907, the fabric of the building doesn't really lend itself to being sort of sustainable with carbon emissions, definitely. So that's been a challenge that we've definitely tried to overcome and continue to sort of work on, because heat escaping from the building is just a massive thing. So how do we keep it, and how do we keep then those boiler temperatures down, etc., is a key one. And the restrictions that are in place with it being grade 2 listed and is an interesting one to have to work through and deal with. But we're on top of the task, I suppose. Yeah. And then really things we learn is that, I suppose, one of our key pillars is sustainability. It's one of our brand pillars. Everyone is very passionate about it. We find that people come in, they want to know, people come to work, they want to know what we're doing about sustainability. Guests come to stay, they want to know what you're doing about sustainability. And from the get-go, 25 years ago, it was a big thing for us then. We have a unique water drainage system that was put in when it was converted to a hotel. So it's an EVAC, a vacuum-based drainage system. So as opposed to a gravity-based drainage system, it reduces water consumption by up to 70%. So it's a key thing we have. And I suppose 25 years ago, putting this into a hotel was a big sort of innovative step. And the same with our swimming pool. It's chlorine free. It has been for 25 years. So it was things that were already there that were part of what we were doing. So we very much believed in it, and everybody that comes in does. But during the B Corp process, we very much learned that we were working in departments in silos, I suppose. And we weren't really strategically recording all of these things we were doing. I mean, the chefs do an amazing job with just picking their suppliers. They work with suppliers that have the same ethos. They only work with, well, I say only, that's maybe, but 95% of the suppliers we use are in the British Isles. The chef goes out, he sees what they're doing, and make sure that they're sustainable. So that part of it, which was a big part of B Corp, to see what your suppliers are doing, was there, but it was recorded in one area in the kitchens only. And then we have things in housekeeping, it was recorded in one area. But all the information was there, and people were really striving to do it. I suppose, you know, minibars, someone had gone, taken the sustainability hat. They'd got a carbon negative company to do the coffee pods for the room, the Hippo, which is based here just in Richmond. They'd used canned wine in the minibars, or we use canned wines in the minibars, again, with regards to carbon emissions. And all of these stories were coming out to guests and to the team, but it just wasn't all threaded together. And that's really what we've done. Yeah.
Could I ask, we've had a question from the audience, Gavin, because you've talked about working with suppliers to put the sustainable products in the property, but you've also invested in the building itself with the water drainage system. Do you think that you could charge the green premium to the customers for these investments, or is that premium on the asset itself and the value on investment?
Yeah, with the green premium, we won't pass on to our guests. We just believe that that's what I suppose I say the future looks like, but the present looks like, that it's the done thing. We believe in it. We believe that it's the right thing to do, and it just helps us with. I firmly believe it helps us as a business on that level. We're not going to charge additionally for it. We feel that it helps us to bring new customers in, new guests in. They're attracted to our business because of what we do. Travel agents tell us that they get guests that come and they say, I want to stay in a 5-star hotel, I want to stay in central London, and I want to stay somewhere that's sustainable. And we're able to do that. So it's naturally bringing us business. But of course, for us, we're really lucky that we are an independent hotel, and it also helps us with team members, because they want to work somewhere that's taking care or really takes the environment seriously. But also being independent, we're able to take their ideas on a grassroots level and implement them. We don't have a corporate structure that we have to go through to say, we want to change this, we want to change that. We can make the decision if it's the right thing for our people here, if it's the right thing for our guests, and it's the right thing for the planet. So yeah, absolutely. So a long-winded answer, but no, we're not yes for it.
Good to know. And briefly, Gavin, it's one thing to achieve said certification, but actually the hard work starts now, because it's maintaining it. And I understand, I think B Corp is it every 3 years you have to get recertified? So when it comes to actually monitoring that performance, like, what do the next steps look like?
Yeah, so we're so important now that we just keep it up. But as I said, now we have, luckily, a lot of the really hard work of getting everything into the correct formats, and all of the information in one place has been done. So it makes it a lot easier for us to monitor what we have. The thing that's, I suppose, some of the challenges, that getting that information, because it's a lot about what your partners or suppliers are doing, getting the information back from them to make sure that they're doing the right thing, and that's something that is a challenge if we want to change any suppliers, and that's going to be an ongoing thing. Yeah, and I suppose now is how we make the building. So we're just looking now at how we can get better. So the fabric of the building, how can we make it more energy efficient? And we're hoping there's a new district heating initiative that's happening in the Strand area. And we're very much a part of that. So we really feel that will help us for the future. So I suppose, again, is to continue what we have been doing and just to move forwards now with what we can do. And a lot about it is safeguarding the building for the future.
Thanks, Gavin. Tommy, thank you for waiting so patiently there. We've touched a little bit on the supply chain. I know you work, that's kind of where you sit when it comes to managing or helping hotels manage their supply chains. And I've heard you speak about circular economy and how we can be better at implementing these principles at hotel level. So with that in mind, how can hotels implement circular economy principles to help reduce their waste and minimize environmental impact?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, just to kind of give everyone an overarching, my grand thesis around sustainability is, I think our role, everyone on this call is obviously has some level of passion around sustainability because we've engaged in this. But I think our role is to be ambassadors for sustainability. I think we're still at a level where there's a lack of education. There's an awareness. People know they have to do something, but there's a lack of education and then implementation of sustainable actions. And I think it's our, if we look at kind of a bell curve, we're kind of at one end of it. I always think of the bell curve in all aspects of what I do, but kind of we're at one end and we're like this echo chamber of people who are passionate around it. But it's our role as an ambassador of the space to kind of draw people from that middle of the bell curve into, so we can raise that level of education. In turn, it raises the impact, but also it brings more finance, more eyes on to what we want to do. And then ultimately there's more impact at the end of the day. But yeah, looking at kind of at best practices, I know it's somewhat really simplified, but I still don't think. A couple of weeks ago I was showcasing at the Independent Hotel Show, and we hosted the ESG hub, and we had a board around kind of what's the hurdles at the moment. And I think that there is that awareness around everything, but the ultimate thing that we came out of the show was the inaction. I think there's like this final step of getting people to take that step on what they need to do. And I still think there's that elephant in the room that realistically hotels or event space or whoever they are, they don't fully understand where they sit at the moment in regards to kind of a benchmarking. So I think and I know this is kind of a really simplified way of people to kind of take that step, but truly understanding all aspects of your business from an ESG point of view, because then from that you can set a plan. I know it's really simplified, but setting a plan which is specific for you. And I think that's kind of, there's a lot of great case studies out there, but I think everyone needs to individualize what they can do specifically around their hotel, their space, because obviously we spoke to an amazing hotel in the Peak District who have got 9 rooms, and they're amazingly, they're sustainable beyond measure. Really, they can pick and choose the guests that they come, and they choose their food. But that's not connected to someone in the middle of London who's got a 500 room hotel at a lower bracket. So yeah, first of all, have a plan. And then I think from a kind of a sourcing and a procurement side, nowadays, I honestly don't think that companies and hotels should be working with companies who can't provide that data for yourselves. One, because I mean, I just think it's such a huge space that you have the opportunity, the power's in your court, really. And it goes back to everything of like where you're going to spend your dollars. But we should be working with suppliers who can provide that data. Ultimately, it's going to benefit you at the end of the day, because you need to provide that data for new legislations, and it might be dependent on the size of business that you have. You might not need that legislation at the moment, or that compliance at the moment. But ultimately, we should be working with companies who can provide that data. Like Soraya said, it was really hard from one of their waste partners to look at like the different types of metric. And I think in my world of kind of waste, there's a lot of question marks around data, and there's a lot of it's a common misconception that say for instance you have a plastic bottle that is recyclable. I think because that level of education isn't there, people will automatically think that because it is recyclable and you put it into the recycling, it will get recycled. And I think this is where there's an issue, because ultimately it doesn't. I think the UK, it's about 45% of household waste is recycled, but then you compare that to like commercial waste, it's around 6%. So that's a staggering amount, considering the hospitality industry and the vast volumes in which we use in food, energy, water, everything. That's a considerable amount of waste that's being generated. And if we can't gather that data to give us that benchmark, we don't have a kind of a platform to look to set goals in incremental stages. So and then ultimately, where is that data coming from? I think that's the final point. It's great that you've selected partners who are able to provide that data. Then where is that data coming from? Are they providing simple metrics around like kind of waste? It's kind of weight, but are they being audited? Is it third party audited? Are they compliant with as well? Are they compliant with kind of like the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive? So I think I've gone round the houses there, but kind of answered. I think the main thing really is it's really important to get as much detail in that benchmarking exercise, because then it doesn't matter how big you are as an organization, but once you have that platform, you can then go wherever you need to go and set a plan for wherever you want to go. But by kind of half-heartedly doing it, ultimately you're going to find more hurdles down the road.
We've had a question come in for you, Tommy. So whilst we're here, let's crack on. Quite simple. What is the best way of measuring waste? Is it that open collaboration with your supplier to make sure that it is being monitored and audited correctly? I mean, where does the responsibility lie? Is it you? Is it them?
I mean, that gets into the really complex world of kind of your scope 3. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of partners can provide, they kind of have a back end of data. For instance, Clean the World, and this is not a kind of a sales pitch, but we can provide data around our recycling and our processing, because we can we have SOPs in place that collect the amount of, really simply, the kilograms that we collect for the soap and the plastic bottles. Then we can show a chain of custody, and we have an output that's then verified by third-party auditors, the likes of Greenview, LRQA. But I think in that sense, you just need to be working with partners who can provide that sort of data for you, and have an open conversation, because there's a lot of the time, well, it depends on the size of hotels that you are, but a lot of the time the partners will need to capture that data anyway. And then, like Soraya said, it just depends on what kind of metrics you want to measure. So it's having an open conversation around, okay, this is going to be how we want to run, have SOPs around within your kind of procurement guidelines of certain ways you want to capture data. And ultimately it's just, again, raising that. I don't think there is, and this may be my naivety, but I don't think there's a true kind of criteria around different areas and different topics around how to capture data. It completely depends on the product that you have, the hotel, the country. So I think we're in that kind of gray area where we're trying to work out these frameworks for us to then have, okay, this is a set of guidelines. And we have some at a high level, but on like specific hotel level and smaller kind of, we even look at like the UK as an example around waste. Like I live on the corner of 3 counties. I've got Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire. We go a mile that way and they collect recyclables in a black bin. We collect it in a green bin and go that way. So there's no kind of compliance on that side. So it's just opening that dialect with your partners and say, this is our guidelines around what we want. And then we've done that with our logistics partners. So these are the compliance that we need. These are the SOPs that we need to capture our data. And then if they don't say that they can, it's companies want to do this now. They need to do it. So,
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah,
no, thanks.
Your question there.
No, it's such a complex topic when you start looking at scope 3 and your supply chain. I actually, I did have planned specific questions about scope 3 emissions for this webinar. Looking at the time, I'm not sure if we're going to get a chance to get round to it, but I will flag the first webinar that we have back in January is called Sustainable Procurement and Supply Chain Management. It's a whole hour-long webinar dedicated to this very topic because I know it can be complicated. So flagging it now, we will be talking about it at a later date. You just touched on something there, Tommy, about regulations and how that there is, when it comes to the consensus around what to do and what to follow, no wonder it can be stalling activity. It could, in fact, in some cases, be leading to inactivity. And I want to come back to Jamie on this point because you have to stay abreast of what's coming down the line from a legal perspective. What changes to sustainability reporting requirements should hoteliers be aware of, and how can they ensure that their methodologies are compliant?
Yeah, brilliant. It's a big question, so I'll do my best to be concise and make sure this isn't boring. Sadly, unlike Tommy, I don't have a grand thesis on ESG regulation as much as I'd love to, but I'm not sure there'd be too much demand for that, sadly. Okay, so 2 pieces of landmark ESG regulation that you should be aware of if you're not already, CSRD and ISSB. And I will refrain from using any more acronyms for the rest of this answer. So CSRD, as Tommy said, stands for the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That's a big European piece of regulation, probably kind of the most advanced of its kind in the world at the moment. That is coming into force next year for the first kind of tranche of companies and applies to kind of larger corporates and groups in Europe. And then the ISSB, that's the International Sustainability Standards Board. That's been set up underneath the IFRS, so effectively the global financial disclosure standards, reporting standards. And the aim of that is to make non-financial data consistent and comparable, sorry, 2 words there, with financial data. In the UK, the ISSB standards are expected to be finalized in Q1 next year, so 2025. The second part of that question, in terms of kind of ensuring your methodologies are compliant, and Tommy's already touched on this a minute ago, and the big thing to note here is that the 2 standards I just mentioned are going to require external assurance. So that's effectively independent third-party verification of your sustainability data. So in the same way that you have your financial accounts audited, you'd have your non-financial accounts assured. So you need to make sure that your kind of calculation methodologies and all that jazz is obviously up to date with the latest standards. So going back to carbon, that's the greenhouse gas protocol or the GHG protocol, for example. But then on top of that, your data needs to be verifiable. So there needs to be an audit trail, or it all needs to be linked back to evidence that then can be independently verified. If I can go kind of one step on from that, Eloise, you said from that question, just as a bit of an extension, I think, you know, having your data assured is inevitably going to lead to more work for these reporting companies. But I think the really crucial thing here, and something that obviously we're very passionate about at OmniView, is that also means that your sustainability data can become decision useful. It's no longer, you know, a marketing exercise. It's not window dressing. This is actually stuff which can really impact your business. if your sustainability results are largely focused on kind of information from your financial accounts, whether they be invoices, supplier contracts, whatever that may be, I know they wouldn't be stored in the accounts, but hopefully you get my drift. You can actually then look at the impact of your sustainability data on your bottom line. And that also means that you can build a business case when you're starting to kind of evaluate new initiatives, I think Soraya touched on earlier. So I saw in the chat from Ancha, there was a question there asking why the word passion is included kind of within discussions around sustainability, when actually a lot of this is focused on, you know, hard data and science. And I think it's a really, really fantastic point. And I think everyone on this call would agree that you know, sustainability performance needs to be approached in a commercially sustainable way, because as much as everyone would love to help the planet, if the initiative that you're looking at is so expensive that your business or your hotel goes out of business in the following year, then you can't really do much about saving the planet after that. You know, so I think actually, if you go back to hard data, if you go back to how that's going to impact your bottom line, you can then make really informed decisions where you can actually put the performance of your hotel and the performance of, you know, the planet or society at large kind of in lockstep with each other.
Thanks, Jamie. That was incredibly concise. So well done. I know it can get confusing when we start talking about acronyms and what means what and what does that sit under, and no, brilliant. So thank you for that, Jamie. I touched earlier that we were going to talk about communication as a topic, and that is a big part of how you actually report on your sustainability performance. So I'm going to come to Soraya and Gavin for my next question. And in fact, we can maybe blend in some of the questions from the audience too. Let's kick off with Soraya, if I may. How do you tailor your communication of sustainability findings and reporting to different audiences, right? Because you've got your staff, you've got your management, you've got stakeholders, you've even got your guests on property. And to blend this with a question from the audience, do you have a formalized green team related to continuous improvements, and are they line staff? Where do they sit within the structure of 4C? I hope that's
Yes.
It's Soraya. So over to you.
Actually, I was just gonna say something before what Tommy mentioned. That I promise I'll be concise, but it is, when you think about that bell curve, for example, I think that's a great way to think about it. I think every level of the organization stakeholder have their own ambitions and motivations, and that's where you tailor the data metrics. So for example, we think about the management team, they want to make sure that we're compliant. They are interested in our carbon emissions because they have to, they get audited on it. Then the strategy, which is my team, we create metrics for the rest of the organization to implement action on. And for the GMs, that's those major KPIs that I talked about, those 5 streams. Then we have a green champion team. So we actually compensate existing team members. And that's that responsible business and education piece. Anyone can apply for this position. We do a cohort every year. The most important part is, I mean, I don't mind if they care about sustainability. Obviously, that's a plus. But for me, it is to build more literacy with people, and they get compensated for that. And I think that's where you get them. And with that, they get a certain amount of like soft skills that they can acquire and data analytic capabilities to really understand how sustainability means into their day-to-day. So when I say team members, we've got finance, we've got maintenance, we've got admin, we've got front of house. I mean, the diversity in itself is like it's way more easier to manage because everyone has something that they can provide on the table when we sit down every 2 weeks, because they can make actions and share that evidence within the team. So it's better to have people from different parts of the organization to drive that change. But I'm going to say one more thing before I hand it off to Gavin. But I was just going to say that one of the success is like having people not part of the Green Champions make the change, because when you reframe the metrics towards that it's not sustainability, unfortunately, but responsible business and cost savings, there are going to be a ton of more people on board. And we actually had this with one of our general managers for F&B, for example. They delivered 33% savings from just like getting rid of bottled water and just having filtered water in our major bars. And they didn't need to consult me, obviously. They said, yeah, it's sustainability at the end. They stamped it. But I think they realized that reducing consumption, which is one of our main values in our business, was actually way more important. And the spillover benefit with sustainability. So I think that's the way that you can communicate, is that it is a responsible business, and reducing consumption can lead to more efficiency.
Thanks, Soraya. Gavin, what are your thoughts or insights on this around tailoring communication to different groups? And you know, is there a green team at your hotel? I know you mentioned your colleague Lee, who oversees ESG an ESG strategy, but I'll hand over to you to share more.
Yeah, so we just basically we have Lee, who's here, who's our chief engineer, who's just extremely passionate about sustainability, and so he champions the whole piece that we have. And then we communicate consistently about sustainability. And it sounds like some really, I suppose, basic things, but we have every day on our daily briefings, daily lineups for the entire hotel, in all the individual departments, we have a sustainability sort of fact of the day that's all put together. And it's not just about the hotel, it's about what you can do at home as well. So they rotate just to get that sort of interest or that consistent talk about it. And then we try to make it as simple as possible as about what's happening. So putting it so the team feel inclusive, because we don't want to be talking necessarily with lots of metrics that people switch off in meetings, that they just feel connected with it. So you're doing this in our guest room using these chemicals, which is then having this impact, and just making it all very accessible to the team, so they all feel part of it. We do have a green team. It's something that, again, Lee champions. Anyone can join, but also we try to make it as part of our direct line meetings that we have monthly, which is sort of an open forum with myself, that there's representatives from each department, and we have a section of that that's just around any ideas that anybody has. So you don't feel like I have to be part of this green team to make a difference. Yeah, absolutely. So those are a few of the things, and we want to make it so health and safety policy is there, fire policy is there. We're working on the sustainability policy, so it's all part of it. So it's those legal things are there. We're going to make that as a legal document as well, or that sort of way. So it's all very structured in the way. That's what we're working on at the moment.
And to blend this with a question from the audience, do you communicate anything with guests staying at the hotel, building on Tommy's education piece around, for example, you know, the standard towel notice? You know, if you don't want your towels washed, you know, leave a sign out the door. Like, how are you communicating that piece around what you're doing to the guests?
Yeah, again, that we do have a standard towel notice, and we just change everything every we change everything every second day anyway, and then people can opt to not have it changed at all. But we don't want to impose anything on the guests. We're just saying that everything you're using, we've gone and done the hard work for you, if you see what I mean. So everything you're using, we try to minimize plastic. So anything that you're consuming, if it is a cornstarch cup or cornstarch wrapping, it's all biodegradable, but we don't want to take away from the luxury. But we don't want to start asking people to do things, because then that takes away from the luxurious element. We're putting in the hard work to make sure that it's done for the guests. We're thinking of this part for the guests, I suppose. So we're not imposing anything upon them.
I was just about to say, this is where you bring in the argument of luxury and sustainability. I can imagine that being a tricky one to get the balance right, but clearly One Aldwych is doing something right. So well done.
We try, yes, absolutely.
I have a final question, which I would like to hand over to Tommy, if I may, because this is to your point earlier about education and being ambassadors for the space that we are in. How can this transparent reporting actually drive positive change in the industry? And as we are talking about monitoring and reporting, like how can that engagement be measured itself? Like how can the success of your engagement methods be monitored and reported on? So Tommy, over to you.
Well, yeah, thank you. To give you an answer and somewhat to link to what Gavin was just mentioning, what they do at their hotel. So Clean the World has all the Hyatt hotels. Given a practical example, have all the managed Hyatt hotels in the UK on the program. And when we first did the pilot a couple of years ago, the biggest feedback that we got from management was the fact that because we have our data, our impact reporting system, which provides all the kilograms of plastic and soap that we collect, the people that we support, how many soap bars we've recycled. The teams were using this on a, like Gavin mentioned, on a weekly basis around showing the data to the housekeepers about how they're actually engaging in a program that supports ESG around environmental social governance. So to be able to kind of use that as a baseline to your question, everything is storytelling, I think, and I think storytelling is so important in any aspect of what you're doing. Sustainability is storytelling, and a lot of it is, I mean, some of the legislations that are coming in are really going to be focused heavily on that external marketing aspect. I don't personally believe that we currently have the right formula to tell the story around sustainability. I don't think it's done well. I don't think it's done correctly, mainly because my belief is that I think the focus around net zero and the fact that there was no level of education when net zero was implemented, that kind of made everything this grey area where people didn't know where they could benchmark, but that didn't engage people into that conversation. But if we can find a way of utilizing data and being able to tell that to a story, and then engage people, going back to my grand thesis that I was talking at the start around our roles as ambassadors of bringing more people into the space. If we can get those things right and be transparent and being open with the fact that, okay, this is where we're at now, this is where we want to get to, but you're bringing people onto a journey whilst increasing that level of awareness, increasing that level of education, and then it's kind of that ripple effect, and I think that's where it spreads through organizations quite naturally. And one thing slightly off topic, but I do believe that you'll have at the moment in hospitality, and I think a lot of people within the sustainability space are being upskilled from other areas. Maybe it's the engineers, maybe the operational side. But I think the role of sustainability will soon become integrated into all the different departments. So there may be one figurehead of an organization or a business to have a kind of a green lead or a sustainability lead, but I think it will be implemented across in this holistic manner, because ultimately you're looking at waste. Waste is, yeah, it's waste that's bad for the environment, bad for other aspects, but ultimately it's also money. Like, people are wasting a lot of money. So once you're able to use that data, do the storytelling piece, and tell the finance team the amount of waste that's happening on the money level, you're bringing them into that conversation as well. So kind of looping back to your question, I just think once we get to a stage where data is really shown and people have got away from this worry of, oh, we're behind the curve of being sustainable, and just kind of be open, bringing the guests involved, bringing other shareholders, all these stakeholders into the conversation, that this is where we're at, this is where we want to get to. It's a journey, and it's a storytelling piece. It's like a marketer's dream, I think, that if you're able to, and I mean, Eloise, it's an amazing role to be in, to be able to tell these stories of positive positive practices which have this kind of environmental and social impact.
And I think what you've just talked about, Tommy, touches on again the question that we had in the chat about passion and passionate, how you balance the data with the passionate communication of it. It's an engagement piece, first and foremost, to get everyone on board so that we can move forward. So
yeah, the question on passion, I mean, that naturally comes from people. The pioneers of this space were very passionate around. They were eco warriors and green and like tree huggers, and that's been there for years since our capitalist world that we're in. But yeah, it's slowly filtered into more and more people's everyday lives.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming more refined, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Soraya. Thank you, Gavin. And thank you to Jamie. What a fantastic discussion. There's so much more we could have touched on and digested today. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time. So I'm going to flag now that we'll leave the webinar open right at the end to allow our audience members to follow up on any of the links that we've popped into the chat. Another mention, all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are in that chat. Please do connect, carry on this conversation, because there's lots that we didn't touch on today. I've just got some closing slides that I would like to run through before I say a final goodbye. If my team can move on the slides, that would be super. Our final webinar of the year is taking place next week on the 4th of December. This is a trends webinar. Effectively, I'm going to be presenting my 5 trends that I believe are going to be big in the year ahead. To give you guys a little teaser, I'm going to be talking about real-time insights powered by AI and luxury family travel, plus more. So if you're keen to learn more, do sign up by using the link into the chat. Would love to see you there. And if you're interested in working with us, for example, across our webinar series, do get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are up on your screen now. Also in the chat too. Once again, thank you to our panelists for their time and contributions today. Thanks once again to Beyond Green and Ruckus for their continued support. Hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoons, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the final webinar of 2024. Thanks and take care, guys. Bye-bye.